Well, welcome everyone to the webinar, Community is Medicine webinar. It's about the ITRC UN High-Level Climate Champion Race to Resilience initiative to help communities around the world organize and operate what we call transformational resilience coordinating networks. And I'll explain what that means in a second. I want to welcome everyone from all sorts of different time zones and nations. Over 30 people from 30 nations have registered in all these different time zones. So we welcome you. And I want to also thank all the co-sponsors of our Race to Resilience initiative, which you can see in the logos below there. The problem we're going to talk about is pretty evident, very evident, but not many people still grasp what's happening. And that is that the climate ecosystem biodiversity crisis is already and will increasingly disrupt every aspect of society. And there's two aspects there that I want to emphasize. It's much more than just an atmospheric climate problem that we're facing. That is happening. Global temperatures are rising, but that is activating and is activated by the breakdown of ecological systems and extinction of biodiversity and changes in biodiversity going on around the world. And that combination is what is really disrupting all aspects of society. So here's just here's the bad news, a few examples of what's happened this year. First of all, important to know that last year, for the first time in recorded history, and probably in the last 10,000 years, global temperatures breached the 1.5 degrees Celsius, 2.7 degrees Fahrenheit threshold that the best science indicates is where extreme danger really can be activated. And just a few of the consequences: the Los Angeles fires going on now, they're larger and more intense. Research has already found because of the climate ecosystem biodiversity crisis. And there's been 27 other climate disasters in the US, including hurricanes Milton and Helene, that each caused a number of deaths and over $1 billion in damage. But it's also been the worst drought ever recorded in Southern Africa, and intensifying rainy seasons sparked deadly floods in many African nations. It was the hottest summer ever recorded in Europe, with widespread heat waves, severe drought in some regions, and increased flooding and wildfires. And there's been a historic drought in the Amazon, with wildfires then causing huge loss of biodiversity. And just as importantly, people just hard to get our heads around because we don't study this, on every continent and in every ocean, what we're seeing is organisms are dying off because their environment has changed or trying to migrate north and south, which is changing the ecological systems in each area. And the combination of these disasters and all these impacts is resulting in widespread damage to society, as well as compounding disruptions to the ecological, social, and economic systems people rely on for food, water, shelter, jobs, incomes, health, safety, and other basic survival needs. This is what we really have to get our heads around. This is what's happening, and it is going to get worse. So the key message from today's session is that the climate ecosystem biodiversity crisis is a societal altering event that requires many transformational changes. And one of those vital transformations is to proactively create the horizontal social infrastructure in communities all over the world needed to address two big urgent tasks. And what we mean by the horizontal social infrastructure is connections between individuals, organizations, groups, et cetera, throughout the community to address two big urgent tasks. First is to engage residents and organizations, local organizations, in providing the mutual aid everyone will need to remain socially, psychologically, emotionally, and physically healthy, safe, and resilient. And at the same time, learn how to use adversities to find new sources of meaning, purpose, courage, hope in life, and thrive. It's going to be vital. And I'll go into details about this in a second. But that needs to be linked with mobilizing residents and organizations in communities to do their part to reduce the climate ecosystem biodiversity crisis to manageable levels, regenerate local physical, economic, and ecological conditions, and continually innovate and constructively adapt to new circumstances. And we're going to react to the circumstances. That's very different than actually proactively adapting in a constructive way. And that's what we really need to focus on. And the combination of these two focuses can prevent and heal pervasive mental health and psychosocial problems and motivate many, many people to create safe, healthy, just, and supportive local conditions. So just a little background on the International Transformation Resilience Coalition that I coordinate. We were founded back in 2013 now, over 10 years old, after Superstorm Sandy hit the east coast of the US, causing mental health problems. We were working on the East Coast at the time. I was running a University of Oregon climate leadership initiative, and we were working there. I'm trained as a counseling psychologist and also in environmental science. So I saw the mental health problems skyrocket there and knew this was going to get worse. Most of the other folks in the climate field don't have that perspective. They didn't see that, but that's what led us to be organized. And then a couple of years later, we launched what became a 2-year intensive international research project. We looked all over the world. We interviewed people, had a bunch of grad students involved, asking, does anybody have an approach or a method to prevent and heal mental health and psychosocial problems in the midst of widespread, relentless adversities? And what we found is that, in fact, we do know how to do this. We can do this. It requires expanding beyond the individualized biomedical model of mental health to a public health approach to mental wellness and resilience that's applied in communities, with the focus being to build population level mental wellness and transformational resilience. That's what we'll talk about today. And then last year, because of the work we've been doing, we were designated as the 35th partner of the UN High-Level Climate Champion Race to Resilience campaign. And the message we really want to give today is, unless we build universal or population level mental wellness and transformation resilience, the impacts of the climate ecosystem biodiversity crisis are going to generate a global epidemic of distresses and traumas. And I think most of you on the line understand what emotional, psychological, spiritual distress is. It's just really feeling concerned about something that's happened in the past, something that's happened to now, or thinking about the future and being very concerned about our ability to deal with it, what it means, et cetera, et cetera. Eco-anxiety is a classic distress. But we're also seeing widespread individual traumas. And again, many of you understand what this means. It's when the way we view the world and our approach to the world and our role in it is shattered by a blunt event or series of blunt events so seriously that we go into a numb state. We can't function very well. We can't respond effectively to what's happening. But we're also seeing, and so widespread distresses and individual traumas are happening all the time. People who are impacted by wildfires, droughts, extreme storms, et cetera, can be traumatized. But we're also seeing more and more community trauma. And this has sort of the same dynamics as distresses and individual trauma, but it goes beyond an individual or a small group to affect an entire geographic area. When an entire community burns down, people can feel traumatized, the majority of the public. It even goes beyond that, though, because people can feel like the community is no longer there to support them because everybody else has been dissociated and traumatized. So it's really a powerful impact. But we're also seeing that the climate ecosystem biodiversity crisis is creating societal trauma. And what this means is it goes beyond just a specific geographic area to affect entire cultures and nations or all of humanity. The COVID-19 pandemic was a societal trauma, and left unaddressed, unless we begin to build resilience, community-led resilience for the climate ecosystem biodiversity crisis, that crisis is going to be the greatest societal trauma modern society has ever experienced. And what's important to understand here is that pervasive traumas feed on themselves and create epidemics. Because unreleased trauma becomes buried in the nervous system. We don't release it. And it can cause people to go into a constant fight, flight, freeze, or fawn reaction. Fawn is sort of just trying to be nice to whatever is traumatizing you, to the people that are traumatizing you, to hope that they won't make it worse. And this puts us into self-protective survival reactions. We just withdraw, that leads to short-term, narrow-minded, me-only thinking and behaviors. We're just trying to survive and get by. I can only think about myself. And that can cause people to deny what's happening, to dissociate from it, just disconnect from reality, to blame others, attack others, try to appease others. That's the fawning reaction. To self-sabotage by trying to self-medicate using drugs, alcohol, whatever it might be, that ends up harming themselves or harming others, or to reenact the very traumas the issues that cause the trauma, trying to work them out. And history shows time and again, when these kind of reactions are persistent and pervasive, they can unravel families, groups, communities, and entire societies. And we are seeing that already in many parts of the world, certainly in the US. Just as importantly, from a climate perspective, when people retreat into those self-protective survival modes, they withdraw, that result from the continued activation of the emotional brain, the limbic system in their brain, that makes people less adaptable. They're not able to adapt very well. And they're uninterested in or opposed to any kind of change because it's too threatening. And that includes new practices to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, new vehicles to have to drive, whatever it might be. All of this is blocking solutions to the climate crisis. Already we see that. And that's coming just at a time when new thinking, new adaptation, and transformational changes are urgently needed. So this goes beyond just the mental health and psychosocial issues and how they affect individuals and families. It also is affect our ability to actually reduce the climate ecosystem biodiversity crisis, to lessen the impacts that are creating many of those. Also, it's important to remember that there is no physical health without mental health. This was a quote from Dr. Brock Chisholm, the first director of the World Health Organization. Comorbidity between mental health and physical health is very common. And what this means is that left unaddressed, these mental health and psychosocial problems that accelerate will also greatly accelerate physical health problems that will put more pressure on our healthcare systems and drive costs higher. So we really have to understand that it's much just beyond mental health issues. Individual mental health and human services cannot address these challenges. Professional mental health and human services will remain important where, when, and for whom they exist. But in many nations and in many communities and regions, there are simply few or no mental health providers. And just as importantly, due to fears of being stigmatized if people find out they're participating, fears of racism in the system, conflicts with religious beliefs, high cost, and other factors, the research shows pretty clearly that at least 50% of the people who could benefit from mental health services or social services will not engage. And just as importantly, as mental health and human services are reactive, they mostly treat individuals with symptoms after those symptoms appear. They do not proactively prevent widespread problems by building resilience or activating transformational changes in their communities. And that's important because we have to understand that climate traumas and most other traumas today result from interacting individual, family, social, economic, built, and ecological factors. This is the social ecological model. You can find lots of research on it. And it really describes what's happening. Down at the bottom, the first square, it is true that the individual biochemistry and family experiences, the biology of individuals affect mental health in some ways. This is where the biomedical approach to mental health focuses on. But in fact, those factors are greatly influenced by interpersonal factors, the connections people have with friends, families, neighbors, or social support networks, and the norms and values of those groups. All of those factors are significantly influenced by the community in which they exist. The conditions of neighborhoods, workplaces, schools, groups, religious and spiritual organizations. All of those, the individual, interpersonal, and community factors that influence mental health and psychosocial well-being are influenced by structural issues, policies, institutions, power relationships, the types and level of services that are available in a community. And all of that is affected by environmental factors, the conditions of food and water, open space, the physical environment, housing, transportation, et cetera, economic system, the type of jobs that are available in businesses, and the ecological conditions, pollution, and many other aspects of that. There's an old Native American saying that we are shaped by all our relations. A Bantu term in South Africa, Ubuntu, I am because we are. Since we are, therefore I am. These two really describe the reality of the world. It's not just the biopsychological, biomedical model that applies. And research shows that the current dysfunction in many of these interrelated factors are creating epidemics of traumas and stresses worldwide. And the rapid changes we're seeing in the social ecological factors that are going to continue to rapidly change mean we simply cannot keep doing the same things we have previously done. Think in the same way in terms of how to respond to mental health issues or social issues or other kinds of issues. We must get out of our silos and begin to think systemically and respond holistically. And when we do that, the massive scale of the challenges we face can really feel overwhelming. But if instead we use them as teaching tools, what can we learn from what's happening about our own actions, about the policies we have, about the ways we structured our communities, et cetera? What can we learn from that? And if we do that, it can really activate deep-seated transformational changes. So to do so, to really activate those transformational changes, we must build population level capacity for what we call transformational resilience. What this means is when suffering is caused by previously unseen external forces that have really no endpoint, no simple resolution or simple cure, that's what the climate ecosystem biodiversity crisis is. The priority must be to help everyone develop the capacity to buffer themselves from and push back against the stressors, and use adversities as transformational catalysts to learn, grow, adapt, and find new sources of meaning, purpose, courage, and hope in life, and find ways to thrive. So what does that mean in more detail? It's about helping everyone strengthen their capacity for what we call presencing, or self-regulation and co-regulation, to ways to calm their body, mind, emotion, behaviors during traumatic stressors, and help others do so as well. That's co-regulation. And there are many age and culturally appropriate ways to do that. There's no one single way, but also purposing. Presencing and purposing are really vital. This is, in psychology, it's a different way of talking about adversity-based growth. And that is to use adversities as catalysts to learn, adopt new ideas and behaviors, and realize that you have different strengths you never thought you had, to create better and stronger connections with people that you never thought you had, a much greater appreciation of life, and much more, and that helps you thrive. So presencing and purposing are primary prevention, and the combination can rebuild faith in the future. The capacity for transformational resilience is also shaped by those interacting individual, family, social, economic, physical, built, and ecological factors. So we need to respond to the scale of the challenges that we face. This means we must expand beyond individual responses, although they'll remain important, as I'll talk about in a second, to think and work at the population level and address all of the interacting stressors. We must think and act at the population level, not at the individual level, and try to address all of these multi-systemic factors. And this was reconfirmed to us when we were doing our research by a comment by the noted clinical psychologist, Dr. George Albee, who said, "No epidemic has ever been resolved by paying attention to the treatment of the affected individual." This was a clinical psychologist, not a physical health person. And he said, even mental health issues, when it's at epidemic levels, cannot be addressed by just trying to treat individuals one at a time. And this point is really what led our research to realize we must expand beyond the biomedical model to embrace a public health approach to mental wellness and transformational resilience. A public health approach to mental wellness and transformational resilience takes a population level approach, not one that merely focuses on individuals with symptoms of pathology or high-risk groups, the groups we define as vulnerable, though they are fully included in the population level approach using what's called proportionate universalism and life course approaches. I don't have time to get into that now. We will go into that in the two-part, more detailed education program that we'll talk about at the end of the session that we hope you will, many of you will attend. But our mantra must be, leave no one behind. Oops, what just happened? I just lost my screen. And I'll come try to do it again. Okay. A public health approach to mental wellness and transformation resilience prioritizes preventing problems before they emerge, not merely reacting to or trying to treat them after they appear. And it integrates group and community-minded healing methods into the prevention strategy. So we must always remember that prevention is the cure. And it accomplishes these goals by engaging residents in strengthening protective factors, social support networks, resilience skills, local norms, habits, local resources that build and sustain healthy thinking and behaviors, not trying to fix deficits all the time or treat individuals with symptoms. So we must proactively try to enhance strengths, assets, and resources. And research shows that mental wellness and transformational resilience can be enhanced. We know we can do it. And that the most effective way to do this is to establish the horizontal social infrastructure in communities, connecting people around the community that I'll talk about, that we call a Transformational Resilience Coordinating Network, TRCN, but each community, each group uses a term that resonates with local residents. And this group engages a broad and diverse array of local grassroots, neighborhood, faith, spirituality, youth, education, civic, nonprofit, private, and government leaders, often not all of those initially. It takes a while to get others involved, but you try to be as diverse as you can. And they jointly plan and implement strategies that strengthen existing protective factors and form new ones to enhance that mental wellness and resilience for the climate ecosystem biodiversity crisis. Here's a sample ideal transformational coordinating network. You could call it well-coordinated decentralization using a ring team or a hub and spoke approach. This is made up of a group that we know of a group in North Carolina doing this kind of work. Inside the circle, you see that around, I'm going to start at the top, there's a steering committee or board of directors, whatever you want to call it, leadership council. Each group calls it something different. There might be neighborhood leaders, private sector, civic leaders, I'm going to the right, youth leaders, public sector, mental health, NGO, nonprofit, faith leaders. It's diverse. Each group's going to be different. They might elect co-chairs, an executive committee. Once they get their act together and they have the ability, they might hire staff. And they're planning, they're in charge. They're making the decisions for the initiative. Outside of that group, though, there might be a whole bunch of different, what we call resilience innovation teams working with different sectors and populations. So up in the upper right-hand corner, again, there might be a group working with neighborhoods, and going to the right, a group working with private sector, local businesses, one with youth with youth groups, one with educational system, public sector, human services, climate ecosystem, biodiversity innovation teams, the environmental focus, et cetera, arts and culture innovation teams. They look different, but they develop their strategies to work with their own populations or sectors, but they share that with the steering committee and with everybody else, and they get feedback on this. I always say, because this was an example, a group worked with a bunch of schools in the public health system, public education system, and came and shared their strategy. And a couple of people in the steering committee said, well, about 10, 15% of the kids in our community are at private school or homeschooled. Have you thought about how to deal with them? Oh, gee, we hadn't. Okay, let's figure out a way to do with that. So you get that kind of feedback. Everybody knows what's going on. They share, they figure out gaps, who's not being served, and coordinate fundraising strategies. This is ideal. That never looked quite this well, but this is what we're shooting for. So why should we organize these TRNCs, Core Transformation Resilience Coordinating Networks? And here's a description of the common phases of disasters. Over in the left-hand corner, left-hand side, you see there's usually warning, not always, but usually warning in the pre-disaster phase. Sometimes it's years, sometimes it's days, sometimes it's just a few hours or minutes. But the climate ecosystem biodiversity crisis, we've been warned about this for 40 or more years. Some would say over 100 years. Then the impacts happen. And when you have a direct impact of disaster, depending on the size and scale, it can traumatize, emotionally, psychologically traumatize 20 to 40% of those who are directly impacted, and 10 to 20% of people who view it from afar, first responders, et cetera. And that goes into the heroic phase. And this is what captures our attention most of the time. People step forward to put their lives on the line to try to help others they don't know, never met, et cetera. It's very empowering. And then you go into what's called the community cohesion or honeymoon phase. And this is where community members who don't know each other, never met, might not even like each other normally, come together and provide food, water, shelter, and other kinds of assistance to them. We're seeing that now in Los Angeles after their fire. We see that around the world. But that only lasts a few days or months at the most, depending on the scale of the disaster, because people then have to go back and put their own lives back together. And when that happens, you enter what's called the disillusionment phase. And this can last for months or years. People are on their own. They're struggling with what to do, how to rebuild their lives, et cetera. And this is when most of the mental health and psychosocial issues emerge. It's in that disillusionment phase that can last months or years. Some people may remain dysregulated, but then most eventually begin to recover, unless, of course, they're hit by a new disaster or another kind of relentless stress, as the climate ecosystem biodiversity crisis will often cause. And that can block recovery or cause a regression. And eventually, though, most people over time, if sufficient supports are there, will bounce back to somewhat similar position to where they were. So why do we need to establish these ongoing resilience networks? It's because the climate ecosystem biodiversity crisis is going to continue for decades. It's not a one-time event. Most mental health and psychosocial problems surface months or longer after disasters or extreme stresses appear. So we need to build the horizontal social infrastructure in communities that allows that community cohesion phase to be sustained for a long, long time. That's what we're trying to do. And we need to always remember that our relationships, our social connections with others in the community, are the bridges between individual and collective safety, wellness, resilience, and transformation. So here's another way to think about why we need to organize these in communities. Because this is where most people spend their time, most directly interact with those social, build, economic, and ecological factors, and are most directly experience the impacts of the climate ecosystem biodiversity crisis. And what I think, if you really think about the work your organization does, or you see piecemeal individual and group by group crisis-oriented reactions are sometimes very important, but they rarely work long time and are often extremely costly. And unless the conditions of communities, mostly the social conditions of communities, change, the social conditions that create those toxic stresses and traumas are altered, many people are going to find new ways to cope and self-medicate themselves to the distress that's occurring and end up harming themselves or harming their families or harming the community or all of society. And it's also essential to understand that there is no community resilience without widespread social, psychological, and emotional resilience. Lots of talk out there now about community resilience. It mostly focuses on external physical resilience and slashing greenhouse gas emissions, strengthening external physical resilience, infrastructure, highways, roads, water, power systems, et cetera, and regenerating, restoring ecological systems and biodiversity are now essential. We must prioritize that. But most of this is done by nonprofits, private organizations, or public sectors on their own. They might ask for feedback from local residents about their plan, but local residents are not really actively involved in it, often therefore creates more inequities in the community. And the work is disconnected usually, and I've done a lot of this work. I find that it's clearly disconnected from efforts to build social, psychological, emotional wellness and resilience. It's just, oh, we're going to do this and then we're going to go home. And in addition, as we've just seen time and time again, although we will get better, the climate models and then the resilience projects we do and the emission reduction projects often will have limit effect or fail. No one could have expected that Hurricane Helene would go all the way west, North Carolina, to really seriously damage Buncombe County and Asheville. We just don't have that capacity to know the scale, the size, the locations of all the impacts. And this underscores the urgency of preparing people, not just our physical infrastructure, preparing people for what's happening by strengthening social, psychological, and emotional resilience. When we did our research, we ended up finding 5 foundational protective factors that are going to be required to help build population-level mental wellness and transformation resilience. And by far, the most important is to build social connections in the community across cultural, economic, geographic, and other boundaries. You can see on the little graphic, this is sometimes called bonding networks, connection between friends, family, neighbors, and bridging social support networks, which are connections between different bonding networks, and then linking social support networks, linking the bridging and bonding networks with groups and organizations that have political power, economic power, and other sorts of power. Friends, families, and neighbors are far more important than first responders in the first 3 to 5 days of most disasters, and often much, much longer. There's simply not enough of them, as we're seeing down in Los Angeles. Social connections are especially important in times of distress because they provide people with the mutual aid and emotional support people need to stay sane and resilient. And building social connections is also vital to overcome the toxic social isolation and loneliness that is creating widespread mental health problems. It is often worsened by the disasters and adversities. But also doing this kind of work motivates some people to find new sources of meaning and purpose in their own lives by assisting others to meet people and connect. Another of the 5 foundational protective factors we found that are vital will be to ensure a just transition by engaging residents in building pro-social activities that enhance local physical, built, economic, and ecological conditions. Again, not just letting private sector or government do it, but engaging residents in how do we support local businesses, create healthy and safe public spaces, equitable transportation infrastructure, et cetera, et cetera. Unhealthy, unsafe, and unjust local conditions create mental health and psychosocial conditions. Unhealthy housing, poor transportation infrastructure, they contribute to mental health and psychosocial issues. And flip side of that is active engagement in pro-social activities that creates healthier and fairer conditions, builds hope, and enhances resilience and innovation. And integrating efforts to slash emissions and build external physical resilience with efforts to build human resilience can lead residents to demand social, economic, and political change when their systems aren't providing that for them. While, again, just like before, motivating some people to find new meaning and purpose and hope in their lives by helping others engage in these activities. A third of the five foundational protective factors we found is going to be very vital is to foster universal mental wellness and resilience literacy by helping everyone become trauma and resilience informed. The graphic shows us the first part is helping everyone understand in age and culturally appropriate ways how trauma and toxic stress can affect their mind, body, emotion, and behaviors, and how it affects groups. Oh, these people, this group is just really getting nutty. What's going on? They're probably traumatized. And they're going to this self-protective survival mode, but also then teaching people through age and culturally appropriate way, the presencing and the purposing skills we talked about. This builds on health literacy and helps people understand what is happening within them and with other people, which can normalize their struggles, reduce the fears of being stigmatized, because, oh, a lot of people experiencing this, not just me, and eliminates consequently their stigmatization of others, while building the knowledge and skills needed to help prevent and heal their own mental health or psychosocial issues. And again, motivating some people to find meaning and purpose and hope in their lives by helping people become trauma and resilience informed. The fourth foundational area is to help residents, and these resilience coordinating networks can help residents establish practices that are known to support mental wellness and transformation resilience. Laughing often in the midst of really horrible situations is one of the best ones. Practicing forgiveness, how to keep learning, how to find simple joys, etc. And active engagement in these activities releases trauma from the nervous system, which helps prevent and heal traumas, while building social connections and engaging people in pro-social activities. And it offers activities that foster emotional states that provide residents with new meaning and purpose and hope in their lives, while motivating some residents to find new meaning and purpose in their lives by helping others engage in these activities. And the last of the five foundational areas is to engage residents in ongoing group and community-minded healing activities. And this is often where you can start. Offer these healing activities in your community to help people begin to release the trauma. You can see healing circles, as they're called, or others are very important for that. But there's many others, and you'll see mental health services is just a small part of what's needed. Group healing gatherings facilitated mostly by peers, normalize struggles, help eliminate fears of stigmatization, and allow residents to hear how other people are viewing their struggles and how they're dealing with it in a non-judgmental and non-clinical setting. But not everyone is going to be willing or helped by talking about their stresses. So you want to offer some of these other approaches too, nature-based events, therapies, spiritual healing, mindfulness-based. And again, some residents are going to be motivated to find new meaning and purpose in their lives by being trained as peer facilitators to help with these. These five protective factors are interactive. I read them linearly, but the communities start with what makes sense and then they add others. Here's some examples of resilience coordinating networks in the US. We have 50 of them being organized or in the process of being organized now in North Carolina through the Smart Start Healthy and Resilient Community Initiative. They focus on 4 ACEs: adverse childhood, adverse community, adverse climate, and atrocious cultural experiences. By, I think that means mostly racism and others. But there's many others, and you're going to hear from a few here in a few minutes. There's many international examples of these as well. They're called mental health and psychosocial support groups. And the Interagency Standing Committee defines this as a community-based MHPSS approach, puts individuals, communities, and social systems at the center of the intervention in all phases of the response. Most are focused on humanitarian issues, child protection, emergency settings. Only a few of these initiatives describe their work as a public health approach. Each focuses on different issues and needs depending on what's happening in the community. Each is unique. There is no one-size-fits-all approach. None address all the 5 foundational protective factors that I described, and only a few are yet explicitly focused on the climate, ecosystem, biodiversity crisis. But they all tend to use a set of common principles and methods. And they show how community is medicine. If those not focused on the climate, ecosystem, biodiversity crisis expand to address it, and thousands of new community initiatives like this are launched worldwide, we can build universal capacity for transformation resilience for the climate, ecosystem, biodiversity crisis. So that brings us to our program, our initiative, the UN High-Level Climate Champion Race to Resilience Initiative that we were asked to join back in last year. And again, thanks to all of the co-sponsors. Here's how it's run. When a group comes to us, individuals come to us and say, we would like to form a transformation resilience coordinating network or expand an existing group or organization or coalition to address, we already have a coalition, but we now want to address the climate ecosystem biodiversity crisis. We'll designate them as a prospective transformation resilience coordinating network. We'll give them a special handbook on how to organize a task force or steering committee, provide them with technical assistance involved in community practice to help them get a steering committee together with a vision, mission, goals, et cetera, focused on the climate ecosystem biodiversity crisis. When they have that steering committee together with the vision, mission, goals, et cetera, we will then invite them to become an emerging transformation resilience coordinating network. And provide them with a different handbook, because now they're going to try to develop strategies to build population level mental wellness and resilience. The handbook will address the strategies, provide technical assistance to them, also involve them in community practice to help them develop the multi-systemic strategy. When they have that strategy in place, we'll invite them to become a commissioned transformation resilience coordinating network. And we'll provide a different handbook still with different information about how to continually implement and improve their strategies, provide them technical assistance, involve them with the community practice there also. So that's the overall approach. Okay. Oh, I don't know what that is doing about that. So I'll come back. We'll try it one more time. Here we go. So prospective and emerging transformation resilience coordinating networks have already been designated in a number of countries and communities: Nigeria, Zimbabwe, Malawi in Africa, Bangladesh in Asia, Dublin in Europe, in Ireland, many US cities, and more in discussion. So with that as background, I'd now like to introduce and have you hear from some people who are involved with these issues or have perspectives on it. So I'd like to introduce you to Becky Turner, who's the Director of Community Engagement, the Community Resilience Initiative in Walla Walla, Washington. Becky?
Thank you, Bob. Yes, my name is Becky Turner, and I'm the Director of Community Engagement for the nonprofit Community Resilience Initiative, and we're based in Walla Walla, Washington State. We provide trauma-informed training for folks who work in education, nonprofit social services, healthcare, basically anyone who works with other people. But in addition to training, we also focus on community engagement, and that's the building and bridging connections between folks who provide the services and their participants, advocating for trauma-informed policy, advocating for trauma-informed practice within local government, fostering a community of practice, helping folks with that purposing and presencing that Bob mentioned earlier. That's what I get to do at a population level. We help to strengthen and identify those protective factors within communities. And at CRI, we believe that community is the solution. Each and every one of us has a part in building that community-wide resilience, and we play the role of connectors. We work with our local Walla Walla Department of Community Health, and a lot of the work that we do is driven by community-wide community needs surveys. That helps drive our work and focus. Our work ultimately is to address adverse conditions, and it started with that Adverse Childhood Experiences study back in 1997. Now, since that original ACEs study, we've had additional adverse conditions have been identified and been accepted, things like racism, sexism, xenophobia, all of the things that Bob was talking about earlier. Now, this includes climate change. That is considered an adverse community environment. So to describe how we're engaged in this work, I'm going to share a quick graphic. It's similar to what Bob had shared earlier, but it's CRI's model, and it really helps us focus who are the people within the community that we're engaging? I look at this graphic and I think, okay, are we working with parents and youth? Are we working with people in healthcare? Have I engaged with the mental health community? There are some other folks that might be maybe surprising for folks to see. We also need to be working with incarcerated adults and returning citizens. All people who are represented in our community, no matter how easy or difficult it might be to set the table for them. People in foster care, people in private business, entrepreneurs, media, law enforcement, faith-based organization, all of those folks are on our list. All of those folks represent different sectors of the community, which we can help with those presencing skills, which we can help with those purposing skills. So that's what we do. Thanks a bunch, Bob.
Thank you, Becky. So I'm not sure what's happening here. Let's see. There we go. I'd now like to introduce Kara Osborne, who's the Partnership Engagement Coordinator with the Resilient Bladen Coalition in Bladen County, North Carolina. Kara?
Thank you, Bob. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kara Osborne from Bladen County, North Carolina in the U.S., and I'm with Bladen Smart Start. We're a partnership for children in North Carolina that Bob had talked about with the North Carolina Partnership for Children. Our organization focuses on families with children birth to 5 years old, and we engage them with literacy, nutrition, childhood development programs. And in recent years, our partnership and some others in our region have engaged our community in education on adverse childhood experiences and resilience. And through this work, we've seen firsthand how mental health and psychosocial issues impact the youngest members of our community. So we believe that the public health approach to adverse childhood experiences is essential to engaging communities that we work with. And we've looked to create a support system within our communities to address these issues before they escalate into crises. And if the crisis does hit, that they can be more resilient and be able to bounce back better when they do hit. Here in North Carolina, especially our southeastern part of North Carolina, we have a lot of climate change events that hit our area, hurricanes, floods, all kinds of things. So with this approach, it not only helps the individuals, but it also helps the community in a broader sense as well. And it impacts and strengthens the health and overall resilience of our community. Early intervention and prevention is key. And by working together, we hope to build a stronger and healthier future for everyone in Bladen County, our region, across this world. We're just starting in this work, and we are a prospective TRCN, and we hope to learn from everyone here and as we engage in this work and from our worldwide community. So I appreciate being here, and I can't wait to learn more from you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Kara. And now I'll introduce Dr. Kenneth Anchang-Yongabi, who's a distinguished professor of public health at Imo State University in Nigeria and the regional convener of Connecting Climate Minds in Sub-Saharan Africa. Kenneth?
Hey, okay, sorry. All right, I hope you can hear me, Bob.
Yes, you're doing well.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah, thanks especially to you, Bob, for inviting me, and also we really do appreciate the work you are doing together with colleagues at TRCN, and also to colleagues here participating in this webinar. Yeah, as Bob has said, my name is Kenneth Yongabi Anchang. And I'm the regional coordinator of Connecting Climate Minds in Sub-Saharan Africa, which is about 49 countries we're dealing with. Climate change is really staring at us right into our faces. And one of the work, the central part of our work is that we are trying to unravel how this climate change is affecting mental health, especially in Sub-Saharan Africa, where there are pre-existing mental health challenges already. What are these challenges? We have poverty, we have lack of water in most of the countries, poor nutrition and all that. All these are already, providing mental health crisis. And climate change has come in now and is actually exacerbating those challenges. So what basically constitutes our work is gathering lived experience stories across the country, across these countries, and that's what we've been doing. And it's really, really very, very sad to hear the stories that are coming from South Sudan, the stories that are coming from Sudan, and already in a very, very complex mesh between climate change and civil wars. So again, I mean, these are kinds of the challenges we're facing. And also in Central Africa, where we have DR Congo, where we have civil wars and all that. And then we also have generated case studies where we're looking at small farmer holder schemes and how, extreme drought and, floods is actually affecting their crops. And what is really coming out and standing out very clearly is that the effect of climate change on their mental health is really an indirect consequence, because what they are seeing, they are not seeing climate change per se. They are seeing the fact that crops are being destroyed by floods and they cannot be able to have their crops, or food on their table and all that stuff. So these are the kinds of things we're seeing. And one of the greatest group that is of primary concern for us is the youth. We've seen a lot of them due to climate change and heat and floods and displacement and all that. They have actually resulted into drugs where they are taking substances, drug abuse, something like methamphetamine, which is widespread, Panadol, and they're taking it in order to cope, increase smoking and all that stuff. So we have built, number one, some of the things that we have had to build as a region. First, what are the emergency, planning programs in order to cope with climate, to improve resilience? So it's that kind of thing we have been building. So we've come up with an emergency climate mental health first aid kit for the first time. And then what are the vulnerable communities? Because for us to build resilience, we have to also look at the vulnerable communities, the vulnerable groups. So that's some of the things that we are doing. And last but not the least, in order to, speed up resilience as a community, we've had to imbibe the Ubuntu philosophy, which is very strong in African communities. And now, Bob, just to say this, the sense of community and the definition of community is African, because African communities are so homogeneous. Perhaps in the US, communities could be very heterogeneous because you have migrants. But in African community, these are endogenous community, people living together who have a certain the same ancestral lineage and all that stuff. So our community systems are very, very fragile, and Africans really believe in that community system. And there's some statement you've made, no one size fits all. And so we are really looking at the different challenges that are coming with in terms of that certain effects of climate change hit certain communities with lack of water, a chronic and endemic lack of water. So we are also looking at how do we provide water in order to cushion the effect on emotions, psychological trauma, anxiety, grief. We have to look at how we provide water. And in certain communities where there's a lot of drug abuse, how do we attend to youths, in order to reduce and decimate the effects of drug abuse? So basically, these are some of the things we're doing in Sub-Saharan Africa. And because you use the word eco-biodiversity, we've just, in a little study now, realized that because of climate change, there is trans-kingdom migration of pathogens. It's something we are observing now, and we're putting up a paper to publish that in certain areas where they have been hit very hard by climate change in Sub-Saharan Africa, we realize that even plant diseases are affecting humans right now. This is unprecedented. And that's something we're trying to put up a paper, perhaps in Nature, in order to bring out this concept, which is quite novel. We know of zoonotic diseases, but we don't know that plants actually can cause diseases in humans and vice versa. So on this note, I'd like to thank all of you, and that we have a global community, and it's only collective strategies that we can actually cushion the effect of climate change, globally. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kenneth, and thank you for all your wonderful work. I'd now like to introduce Jessica Newberry-LeVay, who's the Climate Change and Health Policy Fellow at the Climate Care Center and Connecting Climate Minds at Imperial College London in the UK. Jessica.
Thank you so much, Bob. Hi, everyone. So my name's Jess. I'm from the Climate Care Centre. We work to protect mental health and strengthen psychological resilience in a changing climate, and also to enable climate action that benefits mental health and well-being. We're based in the UK, but we also work globally with a network of collaborators. And one of the main things that we've been doing for the last couple of years is a project called Connecting Climate Minds, which we coordinate, working with many others in a big global network, including Kenneth, who you've just heard from. And this is a Wellcome-funded global initiative that has brought together 1,000 people across 100 countries to build a global climate and mental health network, but also to develop a series of research and action agendas for climate change and mental health to ensure that research is responding to need in communities. These have been developed in all 7 Sustainable Development Goal regions, and also globally with young people, with Indigenous communities, and small farmers and fisher people. We also synthesised all of the research priorities that we heard from that work into a global agenda. And one of the priorities that emerged most strongly from that work was the need to identify interventions that can enable sustained climate action and transformative societal change in ways that also strengthen mental health, such as building this kind of widespread psychological resilience in the ways that Bob has been describing. Something else that has really stuck out from Connecting Climate Minds is highlighting that there's wonderful efforts happening around the world to do this kind of work, as also we've heard from Bob, but it can be really challenging to connect this work and to learn from what already does exist. And as we also heard today, that there's no need to really reinvent the wheel. We have so much knowledge and expertise held across different disciplines, across sectors, within communities. And so there's such an important critical need for networks like what Bob is building that can bring together these diverse forms of expertise, and that can allow this kind of sharing of knowledge, that can elevate existing community-based interventions, elevate and centre community-led work within this climate and mental health space, but also building our understanding of what works for who and why. So I know we're short for time, so I'll stop there. Thank you so much for inviting me, Bob, and really exciting to see this work developing.
Thanks, Jess, and thanks for all the work you and Emma and everybody else is doing there. And lastly, I think I'm glad to see you here, Beto Carvalho, who's the co-chair of the Environmental Working Group for the Global Mental Health Action Network down in Brazil somewhere. I know you're on vacation, so Beto, it's all yours.
Thank you so much, Bob, for the invitation, and thank you everyone for being here today. So as Bob mentioned, I am the co-chair for the Environment Working Group at Global Mental Health Action Network. We are an international collective organization to drive advocacy initiatives promoting mental health throughout several aspects, and I'm glad to be the co-chair of the Environment Working Group. We collaborate with multiple organizations, including UN organizations like UNICEF, UNPD, but also local initiatives in order to build these collective efforts and to drive effective advocacy change, especially in mental health and its connections throughout the impacts of climate change. What we have been doing so far, it's actually the first thing would be to invite you all to join us at Global Mental Health Action Network. And also we have been working together in order to support the construction of local initiatives. The projects that we are currently delivering is the adaptation of the MHPSS multi-sectoral field test toolkit in order to serve as a compass, so local communities could be using it in order to drive the construction of mental health resilient systems, and also the intersection with different sectors like education, social services, health, and among others. Another important aspect that drive our initiatives is to empower youth engagement and meaningful participation as the cornerstone of our work and the change that we intend to see in local communities. There's no way that we can build resilient communities without meaningfully engaging and supporting youth throughout this process as catalytic agents to promote the changes that we intend to see. So as I mentioned to you, we are an advocacy-driven organization. So we act in several international landscapes and initiatives such as the G20 that happened last year in Brazil and the COP30. We are articulating several partners that want to be engaging in these initiatives, and it would be great to connect further with you all to see possible synergies that we could be building upon these international initiatives that could be driving local plans to be implemented. Thank you so much. I will post the link for the Global Mental Health and invite you all to be joining us.
Thank you, Beto. Well, so we provided you, thank you all for making your comments, offering your comments, and for all the work you do. What we just provided today was an overview of the issues and the approach and the Race to Resilience Initiative. We're going to dive into more depth on this on Tuesday, January 28th, on February 4th, a two-part session that'll be 1 hour long, an educational series about so you can learn more to decide if you want to participate. All of you on the line and who view the webinar can participate. And to register, you can go to this site. It should be posted in chat now by Christian. And if anybody who registers will get the recordings of the session afterwards, even if they could not attend. So I would encourage you to sign up. Okay, so it's frozen again. So here's the summary. The climate ecosystem biodiversity crisis is accelerating rapidly, and it means we have two big urgent tasks. Organize the social infrastructure and communities needed to provide mutual aid to residents so they can remain physically, socially, psychologically, and emotionally safe, healthy, and resilient, and find new meaning and purpose in life and hope and thrive. And that's got to be linked with mobilizing local residents and communities to do their part to reduce their contribution to the climate ecosystem biodiversity crisis to manageable levels, regenerate local conditions, and constantly innovate and constructively adapt to changing circumstances. And we believe our Race to Resilience, TRCN commissioning initiative will help communities worldwide do this by building population-level mental wellness and transformation resilience. We invite you to join us in this important journey. And again, if you'll have the link, you should have the link, but we'll send it out after this session's over, probably tomorrow, with the video of the webinar, so you can sign up then. But if you want more information about the Race to Resilience Initiative, you can also go to this webpage at the CTIP website. And again, we'll send this out to you tomorrow. So we thank you all for attending today's webinar. We hope you'll give serious consideration to forming a new Transformation Resilience Coordinating Council in your network, in your neighborhood or community, or expanding an existing group or coalition to become a TRCN focused on the climate ecosystem biodiversity crisis. And we look forward to helping you do that. Thank you very much for joining us. And we wish you all the best for the rest of today and onward. Thank you again. Take care.